Hi Ian, I hope you're all alright and staying safe at home. I'm just going to do today for you an introduction to the America topic that we've just started learning about on Show My Homework. And we're going to split this into two sections, basically. The first section we're going to look at is the impact of World War One. So we're going to put that at the top. Please excuse my handwriting. Now, World War One was very impactful for America, right? It was impactful mainly for the fact that they weren't involved for the whole war, right? Now, to explain that a little bit more clearly, basically what happened in World War One was that America is over here, they're sitting pretty and they're absolutely fine for most of the war. Meanwhile, the rest of Europe, so for example, Germany, UK, France, and Russia, they're all busy fighting in Europe, killing each other, blowing up the country, and so on, right, and taking loads of losses and loads of damages. Now, America isn't involved in any of this for 3 years of World War One. Right? So from 1914 to 1917, they weren't involved at all. Meanwhile, these guys are busy killing each other and fighting each other, trying to win World War One. Now, America had a really good idea at this time because they believed in something called isolationism. Now, isolationism is a good way to remember it is if you just underline the first bit of the word, it's isolation. And to be isolated means to be on your own. And that's what America believed at the time. They believed that they wanted to stick to their own business. They didn't want to get involved in anything that Europe were doing. They just wanted to stick to themselves, right? Stay out of trouble, right? Quite a good policy, really. Right? And their president at the time was called Woodrow Wilson. Right? And he was quite famous for believing in this isolationism idea. Now, this, sounds like quite not, basic stuff to start with, but the real trick that America pulled at this time was not only were they staying out of the war, right, and not getting involved at all, but they were also selling weapons and military supplies to the Allies. Right, so they're making absolutely tons of money for 3 years in World War One by selling and selling and selling and selling to the Allies constantly. Right? Now, this is making them a lot of money anyway, but the thing that's making them more money as well is that they're not taking any damage in the war. They're not having to pay for buildings to be rebuilt or vehicles to be rebuilt or anything like that. All they're doing for 3 years of World War One is making a ton of money. Right? Now, when they do get involved in the war, they're not fighting in America. So American buildings and things aren't taking any damage, right? Which is wonderful for America because they're saving lots of cash. All this money they're getting from the sales, right, they're really happy with because they can just keep to themselves, right, and spend it elsewhere, wherever they want. Now, we're going to fast forward a little bit now. We're going to fast forward to the end of World War One. Right? I'm going to move on to this piece of paper for now. All right? Now, the other reason why America had quite a lot of money at this time was because of something called buying on credit. Now, the word credit, you might be familiar with because your mum and dad might have a credit card or something like that. It's basically being able to buy something, right, and you kind of pay it back later. Right? It's called buy now, pay later, right? And you have phone contracts and things like that and all sorts. Right? Now, back in America in 1920, this was a new kind of thing. Right? So at this time, if you wanted, say, a new radio or a new car or something like that, and you couldn't quite afford it at the time, suddenly there's this thing saying, hey, tell you what, right, I'll just buy it now and I'll pay it back in monthly installments over the next 2 years. Right? So suddenly Americans are going all over America and thinking, I'll have that, I'll have that, I'll have that, I'll have that. And before you know it, Americans have lots more products than a lot of other countries because they weren't having to pay for them. Right? Now this, combined with new levels of advertising and also travelling salesmen. Travelling salesmen were basically people from shops who'd go from door to door knocking on doors with like big catalogues, like Argos catalogues, showing you what they have to sell, and they try and like hook you into selling them on your doorstep. So these two things combined with this meant that suddenly Americans were spending lots more money. Right? Now this is really important because for a country, right, to have a lot of money, it needs people to be spending money. Because if one person's got like £10,000 and they just hold on to it and they don't spend it, then that money don't go anywhere. Right? Countries and governments need people to be spending money and swapping money between things for basically the country to work. So this was making people spend the money, right? Which was a really important thing, right? Now, we're going to move on to another bit now. A gentleman called Henry Ford. Now, Henry Ford, right, is famous for his last name, Ford. He is basically the most famous car manufacturer in history, really. Now, obviously, today you'll know loads of different car brands and things like that. But back in the 1920s, Ford were the business. Right? They were the ones that everyone wanted, right? And they wanted something called a Model T. Now, the Model T was basically a really easy-to-make version of a Ford, right? Now, on top of this, it were also really cheap to buy. Right? Now, this was important because if you link it back to this stuff that we've just talked about, right, people have more money, but they also, if they can't afford it at the time, they can buy on credit. So suddenly, cars are way more available for people. Right? This is brilliant at this time because suddenly you've got people who've never even driven a car before or never even been out of the state they were born in, suddenly has the ability through this new car to go wherever they wanted. Right? Now, that isn't it with Henry Ford. Henry Ford thought up a new way of making things, and that way was called mass production. Now, from those of you, well, all of you who've looked at the Industrial Revolution, we've looked at, with everything there, that people went from making things by hand to making things in factories. Right? Now, that increased the speed that you can make things quite a lot, yeah. But Henry Ford took it one step further. Right? Basically what he did, say he hired 100 people to build a car. Right? He wouldn't have each person building their own car. He'd give them a tiny job. Right? For example, fitting the windscreen on the front. I'm not saying that's an easy job, I couldn't do it. But the windscreen on the front of a car. One bloke, call him Steve, he's going to stick that windscreen in the front of the car. Meanwhile, his friend Barry, he's going to stick the back window in the car. Each one has one job. Right, so basically they can put together one car very, very fast, right? So suddenly cars are getting pumped out like nobody's business, right? People, like basically cars are coming out of the factory, being sold on, and people can buy as much as they can afford, really. So it's really working for America because suddenly cars are massively available. Now that isn't just impactful for the reasons that I've already listed. It also made money for other industries, other factories and things like that. Now this is because if you're building a car, you need glass, you need rubber for the tyres, you need steel, obviously for the majority of the car. Right? Now you need workers to be able to get these things. Factories that make glass, factories that make rubber into tyres, factories that make steel into car doors or something like that. So you also need people to do all these things. So that just creates, altogether, lots of jobs. I'm going to box that off because it's very important. Right? So lots of jobs are being created at this time, right? Which is really great. Now we're going to move on to a third piece here. Right, just to finish off. Now, all of this, right, we've established has made quite a lot of money for America. Right, so we've got World War I, we've got all the money that they made in 1914 to 1917 onwards, for staying out of the war and selling guns. We've got buying on credit, people not having to be able to afford what they get the first time, they can just buy it then and there whenever they want it. We've got advertisement, we've got travelling salesmen. We've got Henry Ford, who's making cars really, really quick. Right, which means that more people can travel wherever they want to, more jobs are being created, not just in car businesses, but also in like glass factories, rubber factories, steel factories. So you've got more jobs being available for people to work in. Right? Now, on top of this, Henry Ford also decided, or thought, that a lot of workers worked better if they were paid higher wages. Right? Because he basically thought, well, if I'm going to pay a worker to do something, if I pay him a bit more, they're going to take more pride in the work. They're going to be glad to come to work. He also started to give people holidays that they could book off. Right? Because before that, you didn't used to get them. You used to have to work Monday to Friday, if not more, all the time, right? Constantly. He also made people stick to a Monday to Friday schedule. Right, so basically, it was a great person to work for. People really liked the idea at this time. Now, alongside all this, whilst Henry Ford's paying these higher wages, that basically means that workers in America suddenly have more money, right? Now, this money that they're earning suddenly can get funneled back into all these things, like, your Model T car, your things that you can buy on credit. Now, these things that you're buying on credit could include things like radios, fridges, or just general entertainment things, tickets to the cinema or something like that. Alright, so basically these things are more available. Cars are more available because people like Henry Ford are paying higher wages for the workers. Now, altogether, if you look at this on a whole, this basically explains to you why America, right? Now, nowadays you'll know America as Donald Trump, and you're the most powerful country in the world, some would say, very rich, very powerful, but they weren't always like that. The 1920s was when, properly, they started to turn into like a superpower, in the world, because they had so much money, right? They had all these things going on, meant that money was just funneling into America constantly. Now, just to finish off, right, one more thing that they had that was really good for them was they had lots of natural resources. Now, for those of you who might be a bit confused with what natural resources are, it's basically anything that comes from the earth, thus the word natural. So it could involve things like oil, coal, iron, livestock, animals, trees from wood, things like that. Now, because America had absolutely tons of this stuff, it meant they could dig it all up and they could either use it to build things in their own factories and things like that, or they could sell it to other countries, which, I'm sure you'll guess, makes them lots of money. And it all ties back to that dollar sign, right? If you can explain, basically, because I've done it quite basically here, if you look at that, right, those 3 pieces of paper, there is not a ton of writing there. If I got one of you to do a peel paragraph on one of those things, you'd probably moan and groan at me because you think it'd take you ages. I've done that in about 10 minutes, right? And that's basically a full overview, quite a basic overview of why America experienced an economic boom, like why they went into the 1920s with lots of money, right? And if you understand this now going forward, this is going to help you understand everything that we look at over the next, 4 weeks and beyond. Right now, this week, I've started setting your work, or Mr. Sherwood, Mr. Smalling, Ms. Patel have set your work. That's looking at why people maybe didn't get a lot out of the boom, right? Now, before you move on to that, it is important you understand this, right? So use the booklet, right? Use the videos that we've set, and also use this, and it should help you understand overall why things were the way they were at the start of the 1920s in America.